He spent years trying to forget her, convinced she had moved on. But when he finally found her, the blow was devastating. She worked as a cleaner, single-handedly supporting a boy with his exact eyes. If you enjoy gripping dramas, subscribe to the channel and comment now from where you're listening. Continuing. The building's marble floor reflected everything with an almost cruel clarity. Raphael Montgomery walked through the main corridor of the Vista Corporate, his latest acquisition, observing every detail of the project that represented another milestone in his real estate empire. At 45, he had learned that success was measured in square footage and numbers that grew in quarterly reports. Each victory had been won with calculated sacrifices. Each step up had cost bonds that once seemed essential. But that Friday afternoon, as his Italian shoes echoed through the polished corridor, something made his world of glass and white light crack. A figure bent over a cleaning cart slowly straightened, and when she turned, Raphael felt time collapse on him like a poorly constructed building. Felicity. 20 years dissolved in seconds. There was the woman he had loved with the naive intensity of his early 20s, when he still dreamed of a simple life in a small house, far from the spotlights and family expectations. She wore a navy blue uniform, her brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, but maintained the same erect posture that had captivated him decades ago, as if nothing in the world could bend her dignity. Felicity? His voice was choked, almost inaudible. She recognized him immediately. For an instant, something flickered in her brown eyes, but she quickly composed herself with an elegance he had forgotten to appreciate. "Good afternoon, Mr. Montgomery." Her voice was firm, formal, on the badge pinned to her chest, only F. Santos in small letters. Raphael tried to speak, but she was already moving away, pushing the cart with precise movements. He stood there, still, feeling the weight of 2 decades of absence crushing his lungs. In the marble's reflection, he saw himself, a $3,000 suit, a Swiss watch, perfectly cut graying hair, a successful stranger who couldn't utter the name of the only woman who had known his true self. The following weeks were a silent torture. Raphael couldn't concentrate in meetings. Numbers danced before his eyes. Architects' presentations sounded like distant noise. His secretary, Clara, noticed the change, but he deflected with the skill of someone who had learned to hide vulnerabilities. It was when the doctor called with the test results that Raphael felt his world definitively reconfigure. Dr. Henry was direct. "It's nothing serious yet, Raphael, but you need to rethink some things. Stress is taking its toll." That night, alone in the penthouse apartment that looked more like a showroom, Raphael wondered what he had truly built. Buildings bearing his name, robust bank accounts, a fiancée who knew how to smile for the society columns. But when he tried to remember the last time he had felt something genuine, he could only think of Felicity. The decision to look for her wasn't romantic. It was urgent. He hired a private investigator, not to spy on her, but to understand where and how she lived. The information arrived in a discreet folder: an address in a South End neighborhood, active participation in the Residents Association, work in 3 different buildings to support her home, and a detail that made his heart stop: a 19-year-old son named Luke. The math was simple. Brutal. 20 years. Raphael spent sleepless nights doing calculations that didn't involve profits or investments. The question, "Is he my son?" weighed more due to responsibility than curiosity. If it were true, it meant he had lost everything: the first steps, the first words, the sleepless nights, the mornings of discovery. It meant that while he climbed the ladder of success, she had single-handedly raised a piece of them both. The courage to approach her came gradually. First, he spent a few afternoons in the neighborhood where she lived, observing the community's dynamics. He saw Felicity leaving a pharmacy, carrying medicine for an elderly woman with a cane, helping a neighbor with a baby carry groceries, talking to the bakery owner about a job opening for an unemployed young man. She had become what she always was at heart, someone who cared. The difference was that now she did it on a larger scale, as if the pain of having been abandoned had taught her to embrace other abandoned souls. When he finally gathered the courage to approach her, Raphael chose a neutral moment. Felicity was leaving the supermarket when he approached, his hands trembling like a teenager's. "Felicity, please, just a few minutes." She stopped, sizing him up with a gaze that had learned to be cautious. "What do you want, Raphael?" The simplicity of the question disarmed him. He had rehearsed speeches, prepared explanations, but before her, he could only tell the truth. "I want to understand what happened. I want to know about Luke." His son's name resonated between them like a confession. Felicity took a deep breath, like someone preparing to dive into deep waters. "You know he exists." "I do. And I know the math doesn't lie." "Math?" She smiled without humor. "You were always good with numbers, even when they involved people." Raphael swallowed the sarcasm because he knew he deserved every word. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" Felicity hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, at Willow Creek Park. Do you remember where it is?" He remembered. It was where they used to meet when they were dating, when the world fit into a Sunday afternoon and the future was a promise that would fit in their hands. The conversation in the park lasted 3 hours and changed everything. Felicity didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't accuse him with the drama he might have expected. Instead, she told the story with the serenity of someone who had already digested pain and transformed anger into wisdom. She spoke of the letters she had sent that were never answered, of the phone calls that went to an answering machine that never called back, of the Montgomery family lawyer who had approached her with a proposal for silence in exchange for money. A proposal she had refused with the dignity of someone who is priceless. "I didn't want your money, Raphael. I wanted you to choose us." "I didn't know about the letters. I didn't know about the phone calls. Didn't know or didn't want to know." The question hung in the air like a sentence. Raphael knew the answer, but admitting it meant recognizing that he had outsourced cruelty to lawyers and family, as if that diminished his responsibility. "I was a coward," he finally said, "young and cowardly. And now I want to make amends." "Make amends how?" "With money, with an apartment, with a better job." Felicity's voice carried decades of hard-won independence. "I don't need charity, Raphael. I never did." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to acknowledge, to yourself, that you made choices, and that those choices had consequences for real people." She stood up, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "Luke doesn't know who his father is. He decided to stop asking when he turned 10 because he realized the question hurt me. If you want to know him, you'll have to earn that right, not because you have money, not because you're powerful, but because you've shown yourself to be someone worthy of being in his life." Raphael stayed in the park until sunset, processing every word. Felicity had become a formidable woman, but in the process, she had lost trust in men who made promises. He would have to prove he had changed, and he intuited that this would cost much more than money. It would cost the person he had become. 2 weeks after the meeting in the park, Raphael made the decision that would change everything. He went to the building where Felicity worked, not as an owner, but as a visitor. He arrived at the beginning of her shift, carrying 2 coffees and the humility of someone who finally understood that some doors only open when we knock, not when we break them down. "I didn't come to offer anything," he said when she saw him in the lobby. "I came to ask for an opportunity to get to know my son, in whatever way you both deem right." Felicity studied his face for a long moment. There was something different there, a vulnerability she hadn't seen in 20 years. "He's not your son because you share DNA, Raphael. He's my son because I was here every day. I know, and I want to be here too, not to recover lost time. That's impossible, but to be present in the time we still have." That's how Raphael met Luke, not in a controlled environment, not in an expensive restaurant, but in the mirrored elevator corridor where he worked as an intern in a youth program at Raphael's own company. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. Luke was thin, had his father's dark eyes and his mother's expressive hands. He carried a worn notebook full of drawings, plazas, bridges, buildings that seemed to embrace people instead of intimidating them. When he spoke about architecture, his eyes shone with a passion Raphael recognized as his own, but directed towards completely different ends. "Why are all new buildings the same?" Luke asked in one of the many conversations they began to have. "Glass, metal, no shade. It seems like they were made to impress, not to welcome. Raphael, who had spent decades building exactly this type of structure, found himself truly looking at the city for the first time. Through his son's eyes, New York City revealed itself as a concrete jungle where people were just ants scurrying between buildings that didn't communicate with each other. "You're right," he admitted. "I always thought in square footage, never in feet of shade." The connection between them grew, but not without obstacles. Veronica Saunders, Raphael's fiancée of 3 years, noticed the change in his behavior. An intelligent and calculating woman, raised in the social circles Raphael frequented, she quickly understood that the past had returned to threaten her future. Veronica wasn't cruel by nature, she was strategic by survival. In a society where status was measured by proximity to power, losing Raphael would mean losing much more than a fiancé. It would mean losing invitations, inheritances, and the social position she had spent years building. The war began subtly, casual comments at the dinner table about fake paternity cases appearing in the media, discreet suggestions to company advisors about how domestic scandals could affect the corporate image, and, even more dangerously, conversations with society columnists about the interesting life of businessman Raphael Montgomery. The first article appeared in a variety magazine, disguised as curiosity, The Millionaire Businessman and the Son Who Appeared from the Past. The second was more direct, Past Romance Threatens Wedding of the Year. The third included a photo of Felicity entering the building where she worked, with the caption, The Cleaner Who Could Inherit Millions. Felicity read the articles with a mixture of anger and resignation. She had spent 20 years building a discreet life, and now found herself exposed as if she were a character in a melodrama. Worse, accidents began to happen at work, cleaning products that went missing, shifts that were changed without notice, supervisors who suddenly questioned her punctuality. "Someone is trying to get me fired," she told Raphael in a tense conversation, "and we both know who." Raphael confronted Veronica that same night. She denied direct involvement, but her smile said everything he needed to know. "You're playing with innocent people's lives," he said. "And you're playing with our life," she replied, "with everything we've built together." "We haven't built anything, Veronica. You associated yourself with what I had already built." The truth hurt because it was accurate. Their relationship had always been a convenient partnership. She offered social charm and connections. He offered status and financial security. Love had never entered the equation. Meanwhile, Luke discovered the truth in the worst possible way. He overheard a truncated conversation between his mother and a neighbor, where Felicity mentioned his father in reference to Raphael. The revelation was a punch to the gut. For 19 years, he had created theories about his absent father, perhaps a married man, perhaps someone who died, perhaps someone who simply didn't know about the pregnancy. To discover that his father was alive nearby and had chosen absence was devastating. "Why did you decide for me?" he shouted at his mother. "I had the right to know. I tried to tell you when you were a child," Felicity defended herself, "but you stopped asking. Because I saw it hurt you, I thought I was protecting you." Luke pulled away from both of them, feeling betrayed by the two adults who supposedly loved him. He spent weeks avoiding Raphael at work, arriving earlier and leaving later to avoid crossing paths with him. At home, he barely spoke to his mother. It was Felicity who took the initiative to resolve the situation. She arranged a meeting in the same park where she had spoken with Raphael weeks earlier, but this time she brought Luke along. The young man arrived scowling, arms crossed, like a judge ready to condemn. "You're going to talk," Felicity said. "The three of you. No secrets, no lies, no half-truths." She told everything, about the love they shared when they were young, about the plans they made, about the letters that got lost and the phone calls that were blocked, about the lawyer who offered money in exchange for silence, about the family that treated her as a social inconvenience, about her decision to leave and raise her son alone. Raphael didn't try to justify himself. He simply confirmed every word and added the details only he knew. The family pressure to distance himself from her, the cowardice of accepting a destiny others had planned for him, the years he spent trying to convince himself he had made the right choice. "I wasn't a man," he said, looking directly at Luke. "I was a rich boy who let others decide for him, and you paid the price for my cowardice." Luke listened to everything in silence. When his parents finished speaking, he remained quiet for long minutes, processing 20 years of history on a Sunday afternoon. "I want to take a DNA test," he finally said. "Not because I doubt it, you're too obvious together, but because I want it to be official. I want you to officially acknowledge that you are my father." Raphael nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "And I want time," Luke continued. "I don't want you to try to make up for 20 years in 20 days. I want to get to know you slowly, as a person, not as a boss. What do you suggest? A month-long trial. You'll accompany me on my schedule. Buses, the park, visits to neighbors. I want to see how you behave in my world. In return, I'll get to know your world, but as equals." The agreement was made right there, with a handshake and Felicity's cautious blessing. The 30 days that followed were transformative for Raphael. He discovered that taking the bus at 6 in the morning was a complete sociological experience. Tired people who still greeted each other, seats given up for pregnant women and the elderly, conversations about sports and politics that revealed more collective intelligence than many board meetings. He met Felicity's neighbors, Mrs. Mary, who made brigadeiros to pay for her blood pressure medication, Mr. John, a retiree who fixed bicycles for free for the children, Tanya, a nurse who cared for 3 children and still found time to organize charity bazaars. "These people live in a real community," Luke commented one afternoon, "not in a gated community where no one knows each other." Raphael began to understand that he had spent decades building walls, not bridges. His development separated people instead of connecting them. His business decisions prioritized profit over social impact. The change accelerated when the company faced a public protest. Residents of an old neighborhood organized against a Raphael project that would destroy a community school to build a shopping center. The demonstration gained traction on social media with hashtags that mocked the construction company's family values. Veronica saw the crisis as an opportunity to regain ground. She suggested an aggressive marketing campaign to discredit the protesters, hiring private security guards to protect the construction site and accelerating demolition before the protests gained greater force. Raphael looked at Luke's drawings, inclusive plazas, spaces that embraced the community, and made a decision that surprised everyone. He cancelled the project. "We are not building this shopping center," he announced in a tense meeting with investors. "We will sit down with the community and redesign the project. I want it to be something that serves the residents, not that displaces them." The decision was costly. Some investors withdrew, advisors resigned. The specialized press criticized the businessman's emotional decision. But Raphael slept better that night than he had in years. Luke was in the office when he learned of the decision. He found Raphael signing papers, redesigning contracts, taking on financial losses in the name of principles he was learning to embrace. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Because you taught me that building isn't just about erecting walls. It's about creating spaces where people want to live." It was the first time father and son embraced,